Bouverie Cave Tragedy. In May 2008, 34-year-old Jeffrey MacDonald arrived alone at Bouverie Cave, tucked deep within the remote highlands of southern Australia. The cave, known only to a small group of experienced cavers, was locked behind a reinforced gate to protect its fragile limestone formations. But Jeffrey had managed to secure a key. He was an experienced spelunker and photographer with a particular fascination for rarely seen underground chambers. That Friday afternoon, he decided to explore the cave alone. At first, the descent was uneventful. He used a wire and metal collapsible ladder to lower himself into the cave's first chamber, where the air was thick with the scent of damp minerals. His headlamp illuminated the wet stone, revealing jagged walls slick with condensation. Jeffrey's destination was a rarely visited side chamber, accessible only through a tight vertical fissure. To reach it, he had to maneuver feet first into a narrow passage barely wider than his own body. As he descended into the crack, disaster struck. Without warning, two slabs of limestone broke loose. One crushed his hip, the other wedged against his shoulder. The rocks pinned him in a twisted, contorted position. His chest was compressed. His arms were pinned at his sides. He was trapped, alone, immobile, and unable to call for help. His voice didn't carry far in the thick rock, and no one knew he was down there. Outside, his group was still preparing for the weekend trip, unaware that Jeffrey had entered the cave early. No one expected to hear from him that night. His absence wouldn't even be noticed until the following day. Inside the cave, time passed slowly. Jeffrey drifted in and out of consciousness. Blood flow to his legs was restricted. Hypothermia crept in. He was dressed in nylon overalls designed to retain heat, but they offered little protection against the cave's damp cold. He had no food, no water, no way out. It wasn't until Saturday morning that concern began to rise. Jeffrey never met up with the others. His gear was untouched at camp. His phone was off. Panic set in. By noon, authorities were notified. Rescuers guessed he might have gone to Bouverie Cave, a site he had spoken of often. When they reached the entrance, the gate was unlocked. Inside, the cave descended quickly into a maze of chambers. The team followed a faint trail, then spotted a backpack abandoned near a narrow vertical crack. A ladder was anchored at the top. At 9 a.m. Sunday, a rescuer peered inside and saw the beam of a headlamp flicker faintly in the darkness below. Jeffrey was still alive. Barely conscious, he murmured incoherently. The cold had drained him of all strength. Rescuers reached down but found his body pinned tightly by stone. The first slab, pressing into his shoulder, had some give. Carefully, they shifted it just enough to free his upper body. The second slab, pressing into his hip, wasn't moving at all. More teams arrived. Airbags, heavy-duty inflatable cushions, were slowly inserted into the crack and inflated millimeter by millimeter. The risk of collapse was high. Rescuers worked in total silence, mud-covered and exhausted, navigating one of the tightest rescues in Australian caving history. After nearly 54 hours underground, the rock finally gave way. Jeffrey's limp body was pulled free, arms first, through the same narrow gap that had almost become his tomb. The stretcher couldn't fit through many parts of the cave, so teams used rigging systems and chisels to widen passageways as they moved. Every movement had to be measured and calculated. Rescuers worked in shifts, some collapsing from exhaustion. At 9:10 p.m. Sunday night, the first rescuer emerged. Moments later, Jeffrey followed. His body was hypothermic, dehydrated, and bruised, but he was alive. He was rushed to Goulburn Base Hospital, then transferred to Liverpool Hospital. His condition was listed as serious but stable. Mystic Cave Tragedy. On October 7, 2022, 3 cave explorers entered Mystic Cave in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The cave is located on private property and is considered relatively unknown. The group entered the cave around 9:15 a.m. Their goal was to explore and survey a newly opened lead at the deepest known section. Among the team was 6'2" veteran caver Mark Jennings. The group followed the known path for approximately 40 minutes. The cave narrowed gradually until they reached a small chamber near the previous furthest point. In the corner of the chamber was a recently excavated opening. The lead had been worked on during earlier trips and was just wide enough for a person to fit through. Jennings volunteered to enter. He removed his helmet and boots to reduce his profile. The passage ahead was approximately 9 inches or 22 centimeters high and formed an S-bend, with 2 successive 90-degree turns. He pushed his gear ahead of him and began crawling on his stomach. The first turn required significant twisting and shoulder compression. The second turn was even tighter. Jennings pushed through with difficulty. On the far side, the passage angled steeply upward into a small chamber just large enough to sit in. After resting, he attempted to return the way he came. He descended the slope head first and reached the S-bend. This time, he couldn't get his legs to fold around the corners. He had no room to turn around, no leverage to push backwards, and no way forward. He was trapped, lying flat on his stomach. His teammates attempted to pull him out using his arms. The angle and friction prevented movement. After 1 hour of failed attempts, they exited the cave to get help. One caver remained with Jennings. Local rescue was contacted. Teams from the Paja Sapa Grotto and Custer County Search and Rescue responded. Several rescuers had NCRC training. They brought field phones, rope, food, water, heat packs, and a hammer drill. The passage was so tight that only the smallest rescuers could reach Jennings. Even then, they could only access his head and one hand. The caver remained calm. He showed no signs of panic. Rescuers began widening the passage with the hammer drill. After each attempt, they tried to pull Jennings out using webbing around his arms while he pushed with his legs. Each round removed only small amounts of rock. Progress was slow. After 10 hours, Jennings began shivering uncontrollably. The combination of cold, pressure points, and immobility caused pain and abrasions. Rescuers applied heat packs and covered exposed areas with emergency blankets. The rescue continued through the night in shifts. Rock dust caused irritation. Space constraints made tool use difficult. Each new inch gained was critical. After 15 hours, Jennings was able to move his knee slightly, his first positional change in over half a day. At 5:45 a.m. on October 8th, after 18 hours trapped, the final extraction attempt succeeded. Jennings was pulled through the modified S-bend using coordinated effort. His body was wrapped in blankets. He was fed and rehydrated. Despite exhaustion, bruising, and early signs of hypothermia, Jennings exited the cave under his own power.